Well, for me to find work out here.
Well, out here, it just seems like everything's different and interesting. Back home, there's nothing to do.
We just can't stand the winters up in the North Country. When they claim this is a sunny state, well, that's what we want to live in.
My children, Autumn Churchill, Clifford Churchill, Nina Churchill, Teresa Churchill, Pat Churchill, and Mary Churchill.
I guess California's been built up to me so much that it's just seems to me like it's just a paradise that I've been really looking for.
Elegant new Mercury with exclusive breezeway design. The Mercury Meteor, sparkling newcomer in the low price field. And the hot new Mercury Comet. Now available with a sizzling new Cyclone 260 V8.
The people and the government of California have never spent much time or energy in concealing their affairs from the rest of the world, and so it's lately leaked out that California has passed New York and become the most populous state in the Union. That is not a distinction that every state would want, but California is not merely resigned to it, California welcomes it. The immigrants who are passing the checkpoint here at Daggett are helping to make California the most powerful state in the Union politically, one of the leading agricultural states, one of the leading industrial states, a state that sets styles in living for the rest of the country to follow, and that experiences problems that the rest of the country gets to only later. The name California itself has a magical and tempting sound. It creates hopeful pictures in the eager mind. California creates hopeful pictures in the eager mind. It created them in the minds of these men. Father Junipero Serra, Spanish Franciscan. Late in the 18th century, Serra founded the missions that were the first European settlements in California. John Charles Fremont, a Georgian, helped detach California from Mexico. John Augustus Sutter, a Swiss and a big landowner. Gold was found on his land. The 49ers swarmed all over it, and Sutter was ruined. Collis P. Huntington, who came from Connecticut in the gold rush. Huntington made railroads, one of them the Southern Pacific. Walt Disney of Kansas City created a picture of his own. Hopeful pictures in the eager mind, and none more eager than these, the Okies. In the 30s, perhaps 200,000 of them left the Dust Bowl in the central United States to become the best-known group of immigrants California ever had. Okies were people against whom not only the economic system had turned, but nature too. California kept thousands out and scorned those who did get in. Now all of that is gone, except in memory, a remembrance of things past.
The reason I moved, I had drought, one right after another, and no crops, and I just went to nothing. I had nothing.
The families back there were living on $3 to $5 and $6 a week. I mean, they were living on that, and they were working, and they wanted to work. So when they had an opportunity to come to California, the land of opportunities then as well as now, and there are still opportunities in California for anyone who is willing to work for it, to develop it.
I think that it's a wonderful place, and not my kids is all made good. My brother's made good. My sister is made good, and our youngest girl, she has a real good job, and all of our children have good jobs, so I think it's wonderful.
Well, I came to California just to spend the winter. And the winters never got over.
I wouldn't live in any other state. I don't think they have things to offer that we have here in California, and I feel I'm a Californian more than I'm an Okie, they call it. I wouldn't go back under any circumstance.
There are Okies from every place. That means every state in the Union, as I see it, has the Okie in the vernacular of the man who wrote the Grapes of Wrath. Okies are from every place.
Okies, as the man said, are from every place, but the meaning of the word has changed. Otherwise, it would hardly be right to describe the Brooklyn Dodgers of the National Baseball League as Okies. Ebbets Field was not precisely a dust bowl, and the head of the club, Walter O'Malley, did not look undernourished before he arrived in Los Angeles. Given the generous terms on which Los Angeles received O'Malley, he would have less reason to look undernourished now.
We'd reached a point in Brooklyn where we felt if we were to stay in contention in baseball, we had to draw more people and have a modern ballpark. We tried for 10 years to build one in Brooklyn, but we weren't successful. We came here, we found a site, we spent a great deal of money, and we built a magnificent ballpark, and the people love it. They've been very good to us. They were good to us in Brooklyn, too. Then, too, Horace Stoneham had made up his mind to his Giants from New York. He was going to go to Minneapolis. We talked, and he thought that perhaps he'd go to San Francisco if we'd come to Los Angeles. So here we are, and here's the crowd today. They're having a wonderful time.
If the Dodgers ballpark at Chavez Ravine is sold out, there are other things to do. Skydiving is not yet a mass participation sport, but it flourishes, and it has become part of the California way of life, which places a great deal of emphasis on the pursuit of pleasure and provides commensurate opportunities for pursuing it. Because it absorbs so many people, California imposes conformity on those who come to it, but its wide open spaces and its climate also make it possible to non-conform in comfort. These are followers of a religion called the Fountain of the World, which has about 60 members, lives on donations, and calls itself a Humanitarian Service Fellowship.
Wait in the valley, wait in the scales of the Lord.
There are a good many somewhat exotic religious sects in California, and it is also a state where experimental diets and unusual approaches to health and a great host of things whose names end in the letters I-A-N-I-S-M may be found. Even unusual ways in which to have a wedding. Reverend Otto Gruber presides.
Duke Vernon, wilt thou have this woman to be thy wife? I do.
Janae, wilt thou have this man to be thy husband?
I will.
I declare that Duke Vernon and Janae are now husband and wife, according to the ordinance of God and the law of this state.
So they glide off hand in hand, skate by skate, into the neon sunset. May their life together always run as smoothly as a well-oiled, oh well. Every day in California, 1,100 babies are born. That's 400,000 a year, about 1/11th of all the babies born in the United States. These babies were born in the Los Angeles County General Hospital, which is the largest civilian hospital in the world. As Californians, they can expect to spend more time out of doors than, spend more time on sports than, spend more time in automobiles than, be better educated than, be larger than, have larger old age pensions than, and live longer than other Americans. If you combine the population increase by immigration with the population increase by excessive births over deaths, you get a figure of 600,000. Every year, California has 600,000 people more than it had the year before. 2/3 of that jump is accounted for by the immigrants, 1/3 by the new babies. By 1970, however, they'll be just about even. By 1970 also, the annual increase will be 700,000. When we began work on this program, the Office of Governor Brown sent us a variety of material and information, including the assertion that California has a healthy economy and the finest business climate in the nation. The statistics from the governor's office become overpowering after a while and leave a slightly stunned effect, like staying out too long in the Southern California sun. In 1962, there were 210,000 more jobs in California than there were in 1961. The availability of jobs is the largest single thing that brings the people in. 16% of the nation's lumber comes from California. It is second only to Oregon in production of timber and of lumber. Oil is the largest single natural resource in the state. It brings in about $750 million a year. In 1962, business activity was up 10%. Personal income was up 8.4%, well above the national average. For years, California has had more new jobs annually than any other state, and it has an unusually high proportion of those jobs in industries of the future like missiles and electronics and food processing. That is partly why employment in California in the last 10 years has gone up almost 4 times as fast as it has in the rest of the country, and why the average weekly wage is about 20% above the national average, and why Californians generally expect this state of affairs to continue. Something like 10% of all the veterans in the United States live in California. A good many of them got to know the state through serving there. California's size and climate and strategic location on the western edge of the continent have brought in 63 major installations of the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines, and 250,000 servicemen permanently on station. This makes for prosperity, but coupled with the emphasis on defense production, it also makes for vulnerability. In the southern part of the state, 1 job in every 3 depends on defense, well over 1 million all told. Areas that that depend too much on a single industry may suffer. The Convair division of General Dynamics gambled on a jet airliner to take up the slack of military production. The gamble was lost. Other San Diego companies guessed wrong too. A city whose population had gone up by 3/4 in the 10 years to 1960 suddenly found itself with unemployment of more than 8%, and it would have been higher if thousands of workers had not given up and gone.
It's quite a mystery to me why some aircraft companies have contracts blowing out their ears and San Diego hasn't been able to get even one.
I think this is God's country, really. Plenty of opportunity here. Of course, we make mistakes like other cities, other big cities.
I just can't imagine San Diego even getting like this. It's just, I just don't understand it. There is no sense to it because it's a wonderful place. We have a beautiful port. Just all kinds of places for industry and whatnot. And it was building up, but for some reason it just seems like nothing happens.
Mr. Haas, you're trying to sell your house. Are you having any luck?
Well, I had a few people come over, but at the present time the market is pretty slow. The reason for that is, of course, you ain't got no people coming in, got more people going out than coming in.
San Diego is an example of what might happen to the entire state if we were suddenly to spend less on defense. But while it goes through its hard times, San Diego professes to believe that they cannot last. It created a research and industrial park and waits for companies to move in. It went on building a development called Center City, that is to become San Diego's business, government, and cultural core. This is an expression of optimism by a city that describes itself as in motion and thinking big. Whether the big thoughts are justified remains to be seen. There is no group in America to whom California has meant more than it has to the Negroes. This should not be overstated. In California's apprenticeship program, to take one small example, only about 2% of the apprentices are Negroes. Still, Negroes have found, many of them, better jobs and a greater degree of equality than they had before. In the 2 decades between 1940 and 1960, while the population of all other groups in Los Angeles went up by 100%, the Negro population went up by 600%. In spite of the generally easier atmosphere they have found, most Negroes have gathered in or been pushed into ghettos. I was taken around one such ghetto by a member of the Los Angeles Commission on Human Relations, John Buggs.
You say the population here is highly transient. Where do the people come from?
The people come from the states of Texas, Louisiana, Georgia, Oklahoma.
What would you find if you went inside one of these houses?
Oh, you would probably find a house with no more than 800-900 square feet with anywhere from 5 to 14 children living.
Would you, I notice there are no men around now. Should one assume that they're all out working?
Well, this is only partially true. Many of the persons who live here are heads of families, and they're women, of course, because these are broken families, many of them.
California is something like a promised land to many American Negroes, but Governor Brown recently called the situation as a whole a racial nightmare. After the Negroes, the most clearly distinguishable group of immigrants is the old people. The reasons are obvious. There are many more of them than there used to be since Americans are living longer, and they have more money thanks to prosperity and pensions, and they like warmth and sunshine. They make a good and largely untapped market for housing. Places like Sun City, about 20 miles from Riverside, are the result. Retirement cities are not all the same. They aim at varying income groups. Some are privately financed, others put up by churches. Some have houses, some apartments, some both. Some provide community meals. Some are not much more than nursing homes. The single common denominator, apart from the sameness of the people, probably is golf.
You don't have the feeling that you've been put on the shelf.
No, definitely not, because I kept active. I fished an awful lot, played golf, and interested in sports, baseball and football, and I've kept active. I definitely don't have that.
We're pretty busy here. We don't ever know what we're done when the day's over with, but we're busy.
Everybody has come here to make a new life for themselves and a new adventure. It's really a new adventure, that's what it is. And we've all been very serious in bringing up our families and lived quite conservatively. Now, we just really want to have a little fun, you know, and do some things that we haven't been able to do for many years, swimming and dancing and follow some hobbies that we haven't been able to pursue for many years, having been too busy with our families.
There are about 18 million Americans 65 years old and older. The number is going up, and so is their proportion to the rest of the population. There will be more retirement cities, and there will be more of them in California. Old age in the United States, for those who can afford it, will be increasingly segregated by age and will look more and more like this.
What follows is a few remarks about Hollywood, to which a funny thing happened on the way to the 1960s. It changed, as this place demonstrates. These are the shrunken remains of the 20th Century Fox studios. The rest is giving way to a real estate development. Now, in the best Hollywood tradition, this change, while dramatic, does overstate things somewhat. Hollywood is still making pictures. Total employment is as high as almost it ever was, and the big companies are still paying annual dividends. It's true that the old Class B potboilers are no longer being made, but the big pictures can still be enormously profitable, and some of the production that's been lost to New York and Europe has been made up for by the production of television films here. What has happened to Hollywood is that the rest of Los Angeles and California have become more important and more interesting than it is, but Hollywood is still here.
Hollywood does, of course, lack a good deal of the flamboyance and color that it used to have. There is now a wax museum to supply some of that.
Los Angeles have come to have a place in American folklore roughly comparable to that of the mother-in-law. They're indispensable, but everybody makes jokes about them. Los Angeles and Southern California, in their present manifestations, really could not exist without the freeways. Their economies would choke to death. Actually, the pattern is for the freeways to be built first and for civilization, as Californians know it, to follow. Freeways make it possible for people to drive 50 miles to and from work every day. They're among the busiest roads in the world, which leads parents who live near them and want to express something less than affection for their children to tell them to go and play on the freeway. The thing that makes a road a freeway is that it has no intersections, meaning there are no interruptions to the flow of traffic, except, of course, the flow of traffic itself. At the moment, there are not enough freeways. For the people who want to use them. One reason being that immigrants entering California add 1,000 cars a day to the state's automobile population. However, the planners hope to catch up by 1980. It costs $800,000 a mile on the average to build a freeway, but in Hollywood, for example, where land is more expensive, it costs $3 million a mile. When the freeways are not crowded, you can whiz along them at 65 miles an hour, which is the legal and alleged speed limit right through the cities of Los Angeles, San Francisco, Sacramento, Oakland, Berkeley, Santa Barbara, and so on. However, between the hours of 7 and 9 in the morning, 5 and 7 in the evening, extreme patience, bordering on dumb resignation, may be required. Now, there are many legends about the freeways, including one about little old ladies from Pasadena who go along at 18 miles an hour in their electric cars or steamers. The truth is that little old ladies on the freeways drive just about as fast as little old men. In that connection, there are various methods of freeway driving. The outside lanes are for the buccaneering types, the adventurous given to sudden bursts of speed and daring darts and weaving in and out of the other lanes. The inside lanes are for the more sedate or more likely to be scared. The middle lanes are for the people who strike a happy medium, meaning they like to be adventurous, but they don't quite have the nerve. The first time anybody drives on a freeway is something of an occasion. The first time anybody drives unaccompanied on a freeway, it may be said like an airplane pilot who is solo. The ideal for people who love freeways would be to live in a house by the side of the road and be a friend to man, using their homes only for sleeping, spending the rest of their lives driving, and being refueled by tanker trucks while in motion. It's the aim of the freeway planners to make it possible by 1972 for a motorist to drive the entire length of the state of California without seeing anything except the road in front of him and what little else he can make out from the corner of his eye. Nature has been kind to California, so the saying goes, and the saying goes that way with good reason. This is a land flowing with milk and honey, about $400 million worth of milk every year, about $4 million worth of honey. It also flows with barley, beans, corn, cotton, hay, potatoes, rice, sorghum, sugar beets, wheat, fruit, nuts, other vegetables, livestock, and poultry. The value of California's farm production every year is larger than that of any other state. The California farmer gets 2.5 times as much income from each acre as other American farmers do. Now, most people, when they hear the word California, think at once of the orange. They should more logically think of cotton. That's the #1 crop. And they might more logically think of the grape we eat, the grape that turns into a raisin, and the grape that turns into wine. It has been estimated that that well-known hero, victim, and statistical item, the average American, consumes 9/10 of a gallon of wine every year, compared with 12 gallons of soft drinks. However, in vineyards like this one being in Santa Clara County, California is now producing 2 or 3 times as much wine as it did 20 years ago. Many of the wines are sound ones, and a few of them are among the best in the world. California is not associated in the public mind with cowboys, but it has something more than 2,600,000 head of beef cattle. It also has 1.5 million dairy cattle. California leads the nation in production of 40 farm products:
cotton is not one of them, but about 800,000 acres are harvested. All of this prosperity on the farm is not a great deal of use when it comes to providing jobs. Farms in California, as elsewhere, are getting larger. The average now is near 400 acres. That requires more mechanization. Only about 7% of the jobs in the state are farm jobs. There's something else about the jobs that do exist. Many of them are held by migrant laborers from Mexico because they involve stooping, and it isn't easy to find Americans willing to do that if they can do anything else. Still, agriculture brings in more than $3 billion a year. California is sending agricultural experts to Chile under the Alliance for Progress, the first state to do anything like that. And among other distinctions, it is the most extensively irrigated state in the country. Many thousands of the 7.5 million acres under irrigation are in the Imperial Valley near the border with Mexico. Much of the water comes from the Colorado River, more than 200 miles away. But other states use Colorado River water too. There has been a long legal argument about how it is to be divided. Beyond that, Southern California knows that it will need a large new supply of water after 1970. For that, it looks to the Feather River, 560 miles to the north. Los Angeles has lived on imported water for half a century. In 1907, it started bringing it in from the High Sierra of the Owens Valley, 250 miles away. California has what it proudly calls the nation's first statewide water project, but it is a distinction that can hardly be avoided because one thing has not quite worked out in this other Eden. The people have not settled where the water is. 3/4 of the state's water lies north of Sacramento. 3/4 of the state's people live south of Sacramento. Still, California is doing something about it, putting up the longest aqueduct and the highest lift pumping plant in the United States, and the highest dam and largest underground power plant in the United States. In spite of all of these superlatives, the demands of industry, recreation, and ordinary living must outrun what normal sources can supply, and there must be another answer. This experimental desalinization plant on the shores of the Pacific belongs to the United States Department of the Interior. It is now supplying 1 million gallons of desalinized seawater a day to the city of San Diego. Its experiments could lead the way to making desalinization economic and practical for California and for much of the rest of the world. California has 100 million acres of land fit to live on, even more if you count the desert, which an increasing number of people do. This is California City, turned into a fit place for human habitation by a series of steps known as processing the desert. It lies 100 miles north of Los Angeles in the Mojave Desert, and it claims to be expecting a population of 500,000 in 1975. California City now has, among other things, a shopping center, roads, a water system, a volunteer fire department with a new engine, a community church, an Olympic-sized swimming pool, and a golf course lighted for night play. Also, what the brochure calls a winding lake with 2.5 miles of shoreline and a plastic polyethylene lining. The mountains also are processed, which very often means that their contours disappear and that they're ground down. It is unfortunate, but perhaps inevitable in the sort of rush that sees almost 250,000 houses built every year, and 3/4 of those in the southern part of the state, which is where most people want to live. trend toward higher prices. The price of a house goes up about 4% a year. But there is no housing shortage if you can pay a minimum of $17,000 or $18,000. There's also a tendency to be heavily mortgaged. The optimism in the air leads people to buy more house than they can afford. Most people live in houses like these. Tract housing, it's called. Housing in mass on great areas flattened and cleared. It's done to a recipe, a kind of instant housing. There's also, of course, this sort of thing, with more grace, more elegance, more space, and more expense. This expansion, this invasion, this pushing out, this subjugation of nature sometimes has undesired consequences, including fire. There are parts of California, Southern California especially, that are beautiful and wonderfully remote, but are also dry and flammable. Of the California scene. In a toothpaste commercial, it would be called the essential ingredient, so that from these ashes, new houses, phoenix-like, will rise. The great surge of people also affects the air. Climate and geography, wind currents blowing between the sea and the mountains make parts of California a smog trap, and industry and automobile exhaust may bring about something like this. Los Angeles, partly because it has so much sunshine, has the most smog. But San Francisco, among other places, is coming along. There is some hope that by 1965, either through devices on cars to clean up the exhaust or by different engines, the smog will be largely gone. Smog has only recently begun to drift into that shrine to sensual living, Palm Springs. In California, this is the ultimate, the end of the line, so far. Palm Springs is built on the site of a spa owned by the Agua Caliente Indians, who are allowing the white man to seek restoration in its waters and renting him their land, while getting along themselves with indoor plumbing and indoor and outdoor money. There is a private pool in Palm Springs for every 5 persons. There are 15 golf courses, which consume 1 million gallons of water a day, fairly remarkable since only 2.5 inches of rain fall in a year. Taste in home furnishing in Palm Springs might fairly be described as richly varied. And if the Huns or Visigoths were let loose in the United States, this is the place they probably would choose first to sack. There is also notable ingenuity. Electronic clocks turn on the bath water in the morning at a fixed time and bring in the maid with the coffee, and other buttons do this. This house, by the way, cost $750,000. To help the maid make the bed, it rises and goes down at the flip of a switch. I feared that it might not know where to stop, and losing control would lead me to the big sleep, but it returned me safely to Earth. There is a possibility here for a left-wing horror movie, The Rising of the Beds, which throw the bosses off their backs. What Los Angeles is to Southern California, the Bay Area of San Francisco, more gracefully and more sedately, is to the north. Time has not exactly stood still in San Francisco, but it is made to pause occasionally. This, combined with a remarkable natural location, an appreciative and ritual approach to restaurant dining, and an invigorating climate, leads San Franciscans to spend an inordinate amount of time congratulating themselves on being in San Francisco. San Francisco itself cannot expand. The space isn't there. But the area around it booms and the immigrants pour in. Some of them are artists. They find the air clear and the colors unusual and interesting. They may occasionally find rich patrons. And more important, once recognition is achieved, it may be extremely lucrative. San Francisco has a slightly self-conscious but healthy artistic tradition. The municipality itself subsidizes an annual art festival. One of the exhibitors I met at the festival was a free soul named Art Grant.
Mr. Grant, your sculpture here, Saturnia devouring her children. You won't mind my asking, what does it represent?
Time.
Time?
Right.
How is that?
Running out.
Time is running out?
Right.
What is this, then? This is part of a carcass?
No, that's part of her.
This is part of Saturnia.
Yeah, her lower limb.
And this is the upper part?
Right.
Do you expect to sell this at the exposition?
I doubt it.
Is there a market for this sort of thing?
Absolutely not.
Would you ever expect to sell any of your work?
Maybe eventually, but right now, nothing.
How long have you been at it then?
Oh, for over 10 years.
And how much stuff have you produced?
I have painted over 1,000 paintings, and I have over 1,000 sculptures. But those are mostly small ones.
So in a period of 10 years, you have received no income from your painting and your sculpting?
I doubt if I made over $100.
What is this made of?
It's made out of various materials. The outside is a shell of magnesite. These are bumper guards that have been burnt. The bosoms are made out of doorknobs, and there's a clock in her belly.
What's inside the magnesite?
Clothing dummy for an armature.
What time is it, by the way?
Later than you think.
Time to go. California is enjoying a wide variety of booms, and the biggest of the booms is in the field of education, public education, and in particular, higher education. The number of young people who are now seeking a college education in California is in the process of increasing by 40% in 3 years. Now, this great buzzing confusion below me here is the campus of the University of California at Berkeley, where there are 25,000 students, soon to be 27,500. The figures are the same for the campus at Los Angeles, which is also a part of the state university system. And there are 3 other branches of the state university at Davis, Riverside, and Santa Barbara, where the figures are somewhat smaller but growing. There are also plans to create 3 entirely new campuses at San Diego, at Santa Cruz, and at Irvine, south of Los Angeles, which will eventually accommodate 27,500 students each. Now, I've been speaking only of the state university system. There are also state colleges, state junior colleges, not to mention the private institutions. And beneath all this come the high school and elementary school systems, which are even more gigantic.
The boom has a natural attraction for educators, especially scientists, who like the climate, the high academic salaries, and the research facilities. The University of California at Berkeley alone has 9 Nobel Prize winners, one being Wendell Stanley, on the right, who went to Berkeley in 1948 to establish a department of virology.
We've got a couple of different bonds there, isn't that right?
And there's a question of what happens to the other strand. If only one strand is necessary, what is the other strand doing?
And we really don't know, and I suppose that this is one of the problems we ought to be thinking about.
Another is the chemist Melvin Calvin, who still teaches undergraduate classes. He is one of 19 Nobel Prize winners in the state. Men like Stanley and Calvin are part of a brains invasion that has made California the leading research state in the nation. That brings in the government contracts now, and it provides insurance for the future.
And, in this case, phenol. there is still one other way in which we can add or put chlorine in the molecule. Here we started with alcohol. Here we start with olefin. We can do one other in which we start with the
state education system offers instruction on all levels. California has more than 9 million cars, which occasionally run into each other or into other objects and must be repaired. Santa Monica Junior College offers an AA degree, Associate in Arts, in body and fender work.
We use a salt solution to prepare our metal so it will accept the lead.
So that as you would comb this out then, instead of this rolling up in a little curl, you'd have a piece of hair hanging with no curl on it.
The women of California from time to time also must be repaired. There is an AA degree in cosmetology to take care of that.
Get the ends curled tight enough, and if you'll take that piece of paper as I showed you and roll the end inside the paper, you'll get a much tighter curl, because if you'd done this on a customer, she would go home with all this hair hanging at the bottom. Okay. Now,
how much frosting are you going to take out?
Just a little.
You're just going to have it right across the top?
Right running here.
Okay. Be sure
it blends into the side.
you want it blended into the sides. Be sure you pour it out at an angle so that it doesn't run. Because if you pour it straight out of the scalp, it's going to run right through the cap.
It all begins here. California has 350,000 children in kindergarten alone.
Section was 1 inch long, and each section took 20 minutes to burn.
That was 14.
I think it has 12 sections on them. We counted them. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. It has 12 sections on it. So, since each band takes about 20 minutes to burn...
One last statistic on education. California has 4 million children now receiving instruction in grades 1 through 12. California is already the most, but it's nevertheless going to be more. There will be 22 million Californians by 1970, and by the year 2000, if present trends continue, there will be 45 million. California crowded, as it is already in some places, will not be the same. The more and more will eventually devour the very qualities that drew them, the spaciousness and the light.
Take charge.
This desert land in Palm Springs costs about $2,500 a foot. That's what California has come to. It's easy enough to describe the steps by which California reached its present position, and it's not difficult to foresee that the processes involved will continue. California has become something of a juggernaut. Behind this juggernaut, there is no master plan. Nobody sat down and figured it out beforehand, and the growth has not produced any significant economic or political theories. There is no California ideology, except perhaps optimism, a feeling of being on the side of the future. There's a slogan that covers it: California is tomorrow. California happens to be where money and people and natural resources and space and climate and opportunity have all come together under the most favorable conditions possible. The result, unfortunately, has some flaws, some large, some small, but it has an overpowering appeal to Americans, and it is unique in the world. Edwin Newman, NBC News.